You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 14th of November 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello and a very warm welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up in the next 30 minutes, has the US missed another global trick? As a new Chinese-owned port is opened in Peru, we'll explore Beijing's enterprising takeover bid for South America's trade. Also coming up...
My name's Alexis Self, Monocle's foreign editor, and I'm here to discuss why COP29 might be better named Flop 29.
We'll hear more about the latest row to beset the conference, and it's Thursday. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, you're here with a countdown. Ciao.
Ciao, Bella. Buongiorno, Emma. Today we delve into the Italian music charts, of course.
Thank you very much indeed for that. All that to look forward to on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. Now, not content with its extensive expansion into Africa, South America has become a major target of influence by China. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Peru this week, where later he'll join the APEC meeting. But he's also there to cut the ribbon on a major Chinese-owned megaport on the Pacific. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined now by William Yang, journalist based in Taipei, and by Andrew Thompson, a journalist and political risk analyst specialising in Latin America. A very good afternoon to you both.
Thank you for having me.
Andrew, let's begin with you. Just tell us about what the Chancay megaport is and what it looks like.
Well, essentially, it's a brilliant deal for Peru. It will be Latin America's largest deep-water port. It will deal with up to 1 million containers a year. It's a feat of engineering. For example, there's an access route for trucks which goes through a 1.8 kilometre tunnel so that it doesn't cause congestion for the local town. And essentially the transport minister in Peru has described it as a Latin American version of Singapore, by which he means that Peru, through this port, will become a much more important trading hub for that whole Pacific Rim area of Latin America. I should also mention, well, there are lots of figures, but basically it will save logistics costs by about 20%. It will cut the time it takes a ship to get from Peru to China, for example, by about 10 days, reduce it to 23 days. And it will create something like $4.5 billion of extra Peruvian exports over the medium-term future. So you can understand why the Peruvians are very excited about it.
And, William, the Chinese are very excited about it too because they own 60% of it.
Yes, exactly. This is another example of the Chinese state-owned shipping company COSCO offering the money to finance the whole construction in return to get exclusive right of using the port and at the same time having the 60% stock in it. And I think some of the concerns have already been raised by experts and analysts and also U.S. government officials regarding how that almost exclusive right of operating the port is going to have negative impacts on Peru. They talked about the fact that the port could essentially be used by potential illegal crimes by drug cartels. And at the same time, they also talked about how it's going to be a challenge to Peru's own sovereignty because Peru is suffering from a lot of the illegal fishing that's carried out by Chinese fishing vessels. And at the same time, the U.S. Southern Command has repeatedly warned about the possibility some years down the road that the port could be used for military purposes. Because there have been other ports in different parts of the world that started out as a commercial port, but there have been some Chinese military vessels docking at those ports, especially in Cambodia, for example. So with the depth of this particular Chancay port, they are saying that if Chinese military is starting to also implement or docking their vessels there, it could pose a serious military and national security threat to the United States.
Andrew, let's talk a little bit about this issue of sovereignty that William has just mentioned. I mean, it appears from what William has just said that China is able here to stake a major claim on South American territory and in an uncontrollable fashion.
I think what tends to happen is that there's a lot of good news loaded at the front of the story. In other words, good news for Peru and its economic development. But then, absolutely right, when you start looking at the details, no loan comes without strings. There are strings attached. In particular, in this project, it was strong enough to get the Peruvian Congress to pass a special law which in effect gives the port operating consortium dominated by COSCO exclusive monopoly rights to what happens in Chancay, which is something that doesn't happen in other Peruvian ports, where there is a port authority which, will concede a terminal on a 20-year lease agreement to one of the international operators. In this case, the port will remain firmly in control of by COSCO and the Chinese authorities. And some experts have described it as not a port that China is building for Peru, but instead of that, it's a Chinese port which happens to be located in Peru. And of course, just to confirm, there is, of course, all the national security concerns are also present.
Going back to you, William, COSCO Shipping, who own a big chunk of this new port, have basically recognised that this is a huge opportunity just for Peru, I'm quoting here, but for the whole region, and have said everything is made in China. What will that statement now mean, not just for Peru, but also for South America, its trade, its dependence on China, or indeed its ability to fend for itself?
So I think this goes in many different ways. I think one way is that the South American countries with large amount of mineral resources that China and rare earth resources that China is in desperate need in order to continue developing its renewable energy sectors will become really solely dependent on the amount of the commodities that they can export to China. And also with the agricultural perishable products, it's basically similarly the same thing. And on the other hand, the Chinese can flood the South American market with its overcapacity products, especially in the case of electric vehicles. We know that the European Union is the latest, most recent bloc that has really sounded the alarm and taken some actions against that. And there's already signs that the Chinese sales and export of the electric vehicles to South America is rapidly expanding. So in that case, this is, I think, both making South American countries become economically vulnerable because there will be a lot less flexibility for them to maneuver around to diversify their export. But at the same time, their own domestic industries will not be able to develop if China continues to flood the market with their products.
Andrew, let's look at the wider context finally, to talk about not just China's growing influence in South America, but accusations by some that the United States, just a little further north, was unable to see opportunity and arguably step in where China hadn't done so far. And everybody looks at Africa and sees the influence of Beijing across that continent. And everyone looking at Washington and saying, well, why didn't you do something in South America first?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that for maybe the last 10, 15 years, the US has not really engaged with Latin America. It's been rather kind of distant. This may continue under Trump, we're not entirely sure, but sort of isolationism has always been a factor in the US, and that's left a gap in Latin America. I should also mention that a lot of the Western financial architecture, things like the International Monetary Fund, do lend money to Latin America, but they do it on very strict terms, often in exchange for fiscal austerity. Whereas what China seems to be offering is a lot of upfront investment with still with strings, but they come a bit later down the line. So in that sense, you can't blame. I mean, some quite conservative governments in Latin America are closely linked to China because they see China, particularly through its infrastructure offerings, giving something that the US is not particularly able to offer at the moment, or not particularly interested because its concerns lie elsewhere.
Andrew Thompson and William Yang, thank you both for joining me on Monocle Radio. The time here in London is 10 minutes past midday. A quick look at the day's other news headlines with Laura Kramer.
Thanks, Emma. In the U.S., Republicans have won the House of Representatives, giving Donald Trump's party full control of Congress to advance its agenda. Meanwhile, Trump has announced more key appointments as he gears up for a White House return. Congressman Matt Gaetz has been named as Attorney General, surprising many in Washington. A man has died after setting off a bomb outside Brazil's Supreme Court, raising security concerns ahead of the G20 summit. Authorities say he attempted to enter the court in Brasilia before triggering 2 explosions, one near the court building and another in front where his body was found. New Zealand's parliament paused as MPs performed a haka in protest of a bill on the country's founding treaty with Maori people. Meanwhile, thousands are joining a 10-day protest march, which reached Auckland on Wednesday and heads to Wellington. And the largest coral ever recorded, bigger than a blue whale and possibly more than 300 years old, has been found in the southwest Pacific Ocean. Scientists on a National Geographic ship discovered it while studying climate change effects on remote Pacific areas. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. Now, COP29 is experiencing what now appears to be a rather familiar moment of discord. What is supposed to be the great conference of the parties when it comes to climate change has become the focus of a row between a global power and lots of other smaller countries. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined now by Alexis Self, Monocle's foreign editor. Welcome to the studio, Alex.
Hi, Emma. Thank you for having me.
Right, what's gone wrong?
Well, where to begin? Shall we begin at the beginning?
Please.
There was criticism when Azerbaijan, which is a major oil and gas producing nation, was chosen as the host country for this climate summit, this crucial climate summit. Then, mere hours before the summit opened, there was a leaked phone call with the Azerbaijani energy minister, who was stung in an undercover operation in which he disclosed that he was viewing the summit as an opportunity to strike more fossil fuel deals. So then we get to the summit, and Azerbaijan's president, who gave the opening address, who is called Ilham Aliyev, in the opening address called fossil fuels a gift from God, and also decided that it was a good opportunity to criticise France, who have since boycotted the summit, as well as Argentina, which has asked its delegates to withdraw.
So this exposes not just the fact that Azerbaijan has got quite cross when you're the host of your own party, that can sometimes happen, but the fact that the age-old narrative of big country suppressing climate change concerns out of smaller countries, not dealing with reparation, not looking after those who are suffering at the sharp end of climate change. This is something that we have heard before, but it's an argument that's not going away, is it?
Well, exactly. I mean, last year's summit was held in the United Arab Emirates, which has the world's 7th largest natural gas reserve, and another summit that was criticised for bringing together fossil fuel executives and being seen as an opportunity to enhance their connections and perhaps strike some extraction deals. I mean, it completely undermines the whole point of the exercise, and the word greenwashing has been criticised in the past and perhaps bandied around quite liberally. But it's difficult to see this as anything else, and seeing COP as having gotten to a point where it is merely a kind of fig leaf to cover up what is such a terrible state of affairs that sees is and is so hampered by global politics. I mean, with the case of Argentina, the news came through yesterday that the country had ordered its 80 negotiators to withdraw from the summits, and while there's no details yet as to why that decision was made, it's not difficult to discern from whom the order came. The country's far-right leader, Javier Milei, has made no secret of his disdain for green policies and called the climate crisis a socialist lie. Now, why did he order his delegates' withdrawal? Well, we found out yesterday that Milei spoke to President-elect Donald Trump on Tuesday, and after which one of Milei's spokespeople said that Trump described his Argentinian counterpart as his favorite president. Now, given that Donald Trump, in his first term in office, withdrew the US, which is the world's largest per capita emitter of fossil fuels, of greenhouse gases, from the Paris Agreement, which was drawn up at COP21, and has threatened to do it again. We can't, it's difficult to see his election as anything other than emboldening the world's leaders who are climate skeptics.
And there is this, are there now wider calls now? I mean, you talked about the fact that it finds itself in this sort of repeat cycle of crisis and discord. Are there now wider calls for a rework and a refresh for something which clearly from the get-go is problematic?
There are, but it's difficult to see from where this will come. I mean, COP is an agency of the United Nations, which hasn't exactly had its reputation enhanced in recent years, and it's difficult to see it having the clout to try and bring the rapidly fracturing world geopolitical order together in order to make decisive action. And as I said, it seems to be that the way that the world is heading, certainly democratically for countries with democratic leaders, is towards more climate skepticism, not more climate action.
Alexis Self, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. (13:17) in Zurich, 12:17 here in London, and you're with The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. Now let's get a roundup of some of the day's business stories with Ewan Potts, who joins me on the line from Bloomberg. Good afternoon, Ewan.
Hi, Emma.
Good to have you with us. Let's begin with a continuation of the subject matter that we've just been talking about. COP29 clearly is a place of argument and problems, and the wider issues of the green economy and the green future are being laid bare. And it appears that markets and the financial world is cooling off when it comes to the fabled ESG aspect of investing.
Yeah, interesting that you're talking about greenwashing, because that's something which the ESG sector has been accused of. An interesting story today on the future of ESG. That's investing for environmental, social and governance issues. That perhaps, ironically, Donald Trump's first term actually coincided with a boom in ESG investing. But this time around, really not so much. Trump himself has barely mentioned ESG, but his embrace of fossil fuels is certain to undermine one of its key pillars. And lots of attacks from the right in the US who see ESG as some kind of woke conspiracy. Now, much of the problem is actually nothing to do with the president-elect. But at the end of the pandemic, when we saw that energy crisis with prices spiking, inflation and higher interest rates, that was really a toxic combination for many of the capital-intensive green energy projects, which were thriving under an era of low interest rates. That saw the shares of wind and solar companies tank, and Republican critics pounced as well, decrying the sector as a bit of a sort of liberal conspiracy. More recently, investors in the US, at least, have been withdrawing money from ESG-focused funds. There have been outflows for the last 8 quarters, the last 2 years, and there are signs that Europeans are calling on ESG as well. But of course, it's not just Conservatives. Many green groups have criticised ESG. The ESG industry. The world's biggest tech companies are core holdings in almost all of the ESG groups. That's done very nicely for investors, but tech companies are massive users of energy, and that energy use is growing very rapidly. All those AI queries, all those data centers being built. So questionable just how green those tech companies are. And also some even more surprising holdings in the world's ESG funds. Looking at this Bloomberg research, the world's or the US the biggest US oil and gas company, ExxonMobil, that's in more than 1,000 ESG funds. And Glencore, the world's biggest commodity trader, including coal, that's in more than 400 ESG funds. So plenty of criticism of the sector from both sides of the debate.
And just tell us a little bit more about how this works in the future, because as you said, a couple of years ago, ESG was absolutely everything. People had sort of very vocally decided that ESG had to be part of the future of finance. With this withdrawal and this reining back, is this sort of a permanent cooling down, or is this something that will be cyclical, and in a couple of years' time, people will recognise the fact that doing well and doing good aren't mutually exclusive?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it is a cyclical issue, and I imagine that ESG funds will come back. A lot of the problems that they've faced are really to do with the global economy. When interest rates are higher, investing in projects obviously becomes more difficult. We are seeing an easing of interest rates around the world, so that will make some of these expensive projects easier to do. And a lot of it depends on the determination of governments. Here in the UK, which is the world's second biggest producer of offshore wind, one of the auctions about a year ago failed because the strike price for the electricity just was not high enough to incentivize the investment in the new world of higher interest rates. So the government simply turned around and said, we can set this price higher. So if governments are determined to take action, then money will continue to flow into green projects. And it's not as if these projects have stopped. There is still enormous investment into renewable energy, wind, solar, and other projects all around the world. So these things are continuing, but they become a little bit more difficult in the world of high interest rates. So it's not to say that the green sector is disappearing. There's lots and lots of green investment. It's still a very key focus for investors. But ESG funds themselves, well, they've certainly become a little bit tarnished.
Finally, Ewan, we have just a few moments to touch on the fact that connected to all this, there's an oversupply of oil at the moment.
Yeah, pretty interesting. This global oil markets face a surplus of more than 1 million barrels a day next year. This is a report from the International Energy Agency. A lot of this is to do with demand, and particularly from China, the world's biggest importer of oil, the world's biggest consumer of oil. We've talked on the programme many times about its sluggish economy, and that is very much continuing. But China is also investing very heavily in electric vehicles and other green technologies, which are starting to crimp oil demand. So self-demand from China is a key part of the story. The IEA reckons that global oil consumption will increase by about 900,000 barrels a day this year and about the same next year. That's half the pace of last year. Just to put that into a bit of context, global oil consumption is 103 million barrels a day. So that means that global oil use is only rising by about 1% a year. So that's pretty good news if you want to see an end to the use of fossil fuels. The other side of the story is the production picture. And despite OPEC's best efforts to curb production in this oversupplied market, there are lots of producers from outside OPEC who are adding supply. So the US, now the world's biggest producer of oil, Brazil, Canada, Guyana, they're all set to grow their outputs this year and next by 1.5 million barrels a day. So there is lots and lots of supply, and the demand is not really there. So that means we'll see a surplus, and that's likely to keep a lid on oil prices over the next year or so.
Ewan Potts, as ever, thank you for joining us on Monocle Radio. You were the briefing. It's Thursday. What a joy. It's a global countdown day. Ciao bello.
Ciao bella.
This is Faye, everybody.
I mean, Italian is such a beautiful language, right?
It's all good.
There's a song, every time I introduce a song in Italian in the playlist, I say it with so much love.
There's a little shiver, isn't there?
Yes.
And kind of the shoulders go and the arms go out and it becomes more expansive. And so thank you for bringing the Italian global countdown for this week. And it's a wonderful amalgamation of everything that's powerful and passionate about Italy, isn't it? I mean, we're going to be encountering quite a few heartbroken alpha males who've kind of overdone it on the Lynx Africa. They're throwing themselves into love and life, and you're just about to take us through it. Thank you.
There's lots of love. And one thing I'll tell you about number 5, I was very surprised with the song.
Why?
Not necessarily because of the song, but because of the artist. But first, I would like to play the song, and then I'll tell you why I was surprised. This is a number 5, Achille Lauro with Amore Desperato.
Adesso dove vado? Senza ma, senza se, senza te. Amore disperato. Lo sai meglio di me, che sei meglio, che non sono in grado. Che frase stupida, ti chiedo scusa ma...
Oddio.
Yes. I mean, we're talking about all those kind of cliches, desperate love. But...
Oh, he's got it with a trowel.
I mean, very velvety as well, I have to say. But the thing is...
Does he sound velvety or is he velvety?
I think both.
Okay.
But the problem is, Emma, I think I first saw Achille Lauro half naked on top of a mechanical bull singing a song called Stripper.
We've all been there.
We've all done that. That was Eurovision 2022. He was representing San Marino. It was quite a controversial performance. It was quite sexy, and there was a mechanical bull there, and he was on top of it.
Who doesn't love a mechanical bull?
Exactly. But I think he shows that he's very kind of versatile.
The video's brilliant because it's got that... Italian male singers, I'm generalising dreadfully here, but some Italian male singers have that thing that... the words are so painful to get out that they have that sort of look of sort of extreme digestive discomfort as they sing. And Achille Lauro has that sort of scrunchy agony on his face while being super macho while holding roses. I mean, it is just it is overwhelming.
I like both versions of Achille, the velvety and the mechanical bull one. But do you know much about Italian trap, Emma?
I think you're just about to tell me.
I will. It's a big scene. You know, it's very... It is. Yeah, of
so
course
big.
It is. It's very established. I think that's, you know, when you look at the streaming services, trap is a massive genre in Italy as well. But at number 4, I was looking at it. Of course, it sounds good. You know, it's a well-produced track, but also incredibly violent. So there's a lot of controversy on that one. Let's have a little clip of it and I'll tell you what is it about. Okay. It's Simbalaroo with Mi piacciono le armi.
Dal bus di scuola passo alla camionetta, la penitenziaria ci fa le foto con le manette. Si ci apponano ogni giorno giù da me. Taglia il dedo della placchetta, taglia il dedo della panetta. Ci ho provato pure a fare...
He's very to the point. He's saying...
What's he saying?
Money brings happiness, and anyone who says it doesn't, it's lying. But then the line I have a problem with, I'm crazy about guns. They drive me crazy. And that's the title of the song, I Like Weapons. There's something quite...
No, you're kidding me.
No?
I like guns.
Well, I hope my Italian is okay. I like weapons. And it's quite nihilistic as well. So there's something quite, you know, intense about it. And of course, Simbalaroo, he had some problems with the courts, you know, the criminal courts.
What happened?
I don't know the latest.
Would you like me to look it up?
Yeah, please do. But I think he's fine because he's touring next month. So I don't think he's in jail at the moment.
He might have to wear a tag on stage.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, he's one of those men who does those super macho things where he's like, I love weapons, yet still thinks that wearing slides is a big thing. So I've never... Tell me...
So not very scary, Simbalaroo.
No, he couldn't chase me because he'd trip over his slides. But he's got that incredibly accurate, that sort of razor-sharp haircut where you know he spent 4 hours getting his hair done and then just throws on a pair of £30 million slides. Is it a good look? Is this a thing? I haven't seen you in slides.
Not a good look, but I like the beats.
I like
gotta
the beats.
Be honest.
There is something about rap music, both in French and Italian, which really works.
I agree with you.
Said the old lady in the corner. Okay, so we've gone from heartbroken man to man who likes guns. This is good. Where are we going next, Faye?
We are going to a very 80s-inspired song. But this guy, thanks to our colleague Anita, who knows more Italian, his name is Cesare Cremonini. He was big in Italy in the late 90s. He was the lead vocalist of a band called Luna Pop, which I didn't know. I'm going to do my research now.
We all learn with you, Faye.
Absolutely. And he he said that this song is a turning point in the sounds, because it's very electronic as well. So I think he's also kind of changing a little bit of the genres, like Achille Lauro that we just heard. I love this track, and I'm going to tell you first thing, I will add the song to the playlist because I think it's beautiful. This is Cesare Cremonini with Ora che non ho più te.
Spegni le luci della città, così che il cielo si illumina. Balliamo l'ultima volta, ma è già finita la musica. Spegni le luci della città.
Right, this is Suffering.
He's very handsome. He does have a scar on his face.
He looks so fed up. And he's leaning against a woman in a field. And he looks like a man defeated.
Of course,
and
the name of the song is Now That I Don't Have You Anymore. So it's about a finished love, but he said that in the end, there's some optimism in the song because new life will begin very soon. So he's a little bit stressed, but things will be fine.
Okay, so okay. Is that really for the playlist? A bit of stress? I don't think we need any more stress.
Maybe for those listeners who don't understand Italian.
Moment. For our international audience.
Exactly.
We thought we'd cut you out of the sad bits. Okay, that's no problem. I'm not sure about that one. But I suspect that earworm will stay with me for the afternoon with the miserable man in the field. Okay, so we've had a overblown teenager in his bedroom getting cross. We've had a gun-toting man win slides, and we've had a misery guts in a field. That's our 5, 4, 3, 2. Is it all boys this week?
It is all boys. Well, there's a girl, but I shouldn't say too much.
Okay.
And number 2, let's talk about long-distance relationships.
Let's.
They are hard.
They are.
But this song is kind of optimistic about it in a sad-ish way. It's a very conventional pop rock track. It's by Alfa, the singer Alfa. The song is called Il Filo Rosso, the Red Thread.
E passare da fare tutto un tutto da rifare, ma guardaci adesso che cosa siamo diventati da sconosciuti innamorati.
It's a bit boring.
Yeah, it's really boring. Quite a lot of sorry for the fans of this.
Sorry,
Il Filo Rosso. It's fantastic, but boring, yes, possibly predictable rather than boring, but it did inspire some quite fun rocking from side to side in a sort of bad concert, lighter out swaying style. So maybe it might just carry us all aloft. I don't know. Tell us about who the artist is and what they're doing here.
So Alfa is a young singer from Genoa, and he likes his kind of pop rock ballads. And this song, The Red Thread, apparently, I think it comes from China. I'm not sure if Alfa knows about this, but I was doing some research on that. So basically, when you're far away, apparently there's an invisible red thread that unites you. And I think that's what he meant about a long-distance relationship. It kind of can still work because the red thread is there. I mean, that's too philosophical, perhaps, for the global countdown. But
we can dive deep.
We
can explore our souls.
Wow.
Don't bother with the video. It's about people just hugging at railway stations. It's a little bit twee. But is that going on the playlist? No. Okay. Right, so we've had... What's number 1?
Number 1, you're missing some kind of female singers, right? We have partially.
Partially female singer.
Well, maybe I'm not explaining myself correctly. We have Olly, okay, very famous Italian singer. Angelina Mango, who represented Italy on Eurovision this year.
I love Angelina Mango.
She's great.
She's amazing. She's a powerhouse.
She's a powerhouse. So they're both singing, of course, about love. Let's have a listen to the number 1 song in Italy for a few weeks, I have to say. Per due come noi, for those like us.
Per due come noi, che si vogliono bene, che si amano strano, siamo cresciuti assieme. Tra due come noi, non c'è chi vince o chi perde, c'è chi mente e chi ammette. Non fare finta di niente, di niente, di niente, di niente, no.
It's a super little tune. Ollie's obviously borrowed Achille Lauro's links because he's banging around a teenage bedroom getting cross. But here's the thing that I can never get over with Italy, and I do wish he'd stop this. Achille Lauro is fully clothed. Angelina Mango is on a bed in her pants. And it's like, come on, Italy. If Angelina Mango's going to be on a bed in her pants, Ollie can be on a bed in his pants. It's like, please, or both put clothes on. I've suddenly turned into sort of like an ancient grandma here, but I suddenly felt as if I needed to put a large, comfortable sweater or a coat around Angelina Mango to protect her modesty.
Emma, don't worry too much. The Italian singers, they're also stripping off a little bit.
Oh, really?
More and more. I mean,
Okay.
Achille Lauro, 2 years ago.
Oh, yes, he had no clothes on.
Exactly.
On his big
well,
ball.
Partially, yes.
Marvellous. Okay, what's the verdict of Ollie and Angelina Mango in the bad bed set with no clothes on?
Great tune, very well produced. I think Angelina Mango can do no wrong. I'm considering this one for the playlist. Not quite Cesare Cremonini. I think you should give it a chance to our number 3 this time, Emma.
A wonderful guide to all Italy. Thank you, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And that was the Global Countdown, and that's all the time we have for today's edition of The Briefing. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producer Laura Kramer and our researcher Sana Jumani and our studio manager Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing's back tomorrow at the same time, but for now from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.